Great coffee this morning. Are you serious? But the earthquakes are shaking, but drain the swamp. Drain the swamp. That is really well, actually, Heidi found this yesterday here in California. This is the Military Press. All right? The Military Press puts out a magazine, and that's the front cover. Draining the swamp. Are you serious? Well, here's what their pretty powerful article here. And here's their take on it. And this is coming, of course, from a military point of view. President-elect Trump says he's uniquely qualified to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. He can do it, he said at one of his debates, because as a businessman, he understands American cronyism. Quote, with Hillary Clinton, I said, be at my wedding. And she came to my wedding. You know why? She had no choice, because I gave. He said that's why he gives money to politicians from both parties. When they call, I give. When they need something from them 2 years later, 3 years later, I call them. They are there for me. That's crony capitalism. Ideally, laws are applied equally. No one gets a special break because he gives money. But today's complex government allows the politically connected to be corrupted on most everything. Even parts of the government swamp designed to protect customers and consumers, like the Dodd-Frank banking rules, gets corrupted. Banks watch little changes in rules far more closely than you ever will. Then they exploit them. Bank lobbyists make money off complex laws like Dodd-Frank. They fight tooth and nail to keep them and not abolish them. Congress recently almost got rid of one obvious example of crony capitalism, the Export-Import Bank. To encourage exports of American products, bureaucrats give loans to Boeing and other big companies. Some principal Republicans tried to eliminate this corporate welfare, but Export loans were voted back. Export-import loans were voted back in during the final hours of budget negotiations. Government programs almost never die. Businesses in cozy relationships with government don't die either. Jeff Dice, president of Free Market Mises Institute, says that when the housing bubble burst, banks should have been allowed to fail and put through the bankruptcy liquidation process. But investors would have lost big. But that's okay, said Deese. That's the difference between free market capitalism and state capitalism. With state capitalism, there are upsides for the parties involved, but no downsides. In the swamp, no one but taxpayers pay for the mistakes. Politicians routinely promise to change the culture, but once they get in D.C., they lose interest, according to Donald Trump. And they go to Washington, sometimes something happens. They become weak. I promise this is not going to happen to me. That's according to Donald Trump. And I want to believe him, but even if he were an utterly principled man, I await evidence of that. It's tough to constantly say no to people. And when you're in Congress, people ask you for money all day long. I need a grant for this. I need a grant for that. I need a loan for this. I need a tax break, an abatement, whatever it is. And that's what really happens, folks. All kinds of political maneuvering goes on. In addition, the players above, they'll say, we do so much good. My business needs a subsidy, a protective tariff. We employ so many people in your state. So it goes on week after week after week. Few people bother to go to Washington to ask for spending cuts, even though America is headed toward bankruptcy. 90% of our congressional testimony comes from people who want more stuff. Politician cronies get more stuff, and it just goes on and on. So in other words, the author here is saying Draining the swamp is not as easy. It's easier said than done. Well, and I think Donald Trump has all intentions of going into Washington and trying to reshape the culture. And in some degree, he will by putting in people in different positions who will have that mentality. But at the end of the day, there is a lot of people involved. Lobbyists are everywhere, and the Congress, both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, all feed off of these lobbyists. So the executive branch is limited to what overall powers it has. The legislative branch has a tremendous amount of power as well. And then there's the judicial branch to rule on those laws that have passed and the constitutionality of them. That's how it's supposed to work. But folks, we're talking Washington. We're talking a very big, soupy, stinky swamp.